Lamentations, chapter 1, verses 1 through 6. You can follow along in your free Bibles if you'd like on page 762 or 717, depending on the version. How deserted lies this city, once so full of people. How like a widow is she, who once was great among the nations. She who was queen among the provinces has now become a slave. Bitterly she weeps at night. Tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers there is no one to comfort her. All her friends have betrayed her. They have become her enemies. After affliction and harsh labor, Judah has gone into exile. She dwells among the nations. She finds no resting place. All who preserve her have overtaken her in the midst of her distress. The roads to Zion mourn, for no one comes to her appointed festivals. All her gateways are desolate, her priests groan, her young women grieve, and she is bitter in anguish. Her foes have become her masters, her enemies are at ease. The Lord has brought her grief because of her many sins. Her children have gone into exile, captive before the foe. All the splendor has departed from daughter Zion. Her princes are like deer that find no pasture. In weakness they have fled before the pursuer.
Gospel, chapter 17, verses 5 through 10. The apostle said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Would any of you say to your servant who had just come in from the field after plowing or tending sheep, 'Come, sit down for dinner'? Wouldn't you say instead, 'Fix my dinner, put on the clothes of a table servant, and wait on me while I eat and drink, and after that you can eat and drink'? You won't thank the servant because the servant did what you asked, will you? In the same way, when you have done everything required of you, you should say, 'We servants deserve no special praise. We have only done our duty.'" And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. A couple of disclaimers. So for this Sunday, you might hear me say a few times, we don't always do it this way, or we do things a little different today, which I know is unsettling to most Presbyterians, but we're going to try something different today. So at some point during the service, during my sermon, I'll put my phone number up there. So you can write it down. No, not the pancakes, but the phone number. There you go. So you can see that, and then put it down in your phone, or text me any questions you have about today's message. So as soon as I'm done with the message, I'll look at those, and I'll have a disclaimer as well. If they're appropriate, I'll field them. And if they're not something I could handle and something that's another sermon, I'll try to address them as well. So anything that just kind of pops in your mind that you're curious about this message or about some scripture thing that we've covered today, we'll make it a little conversational. And after the message is done, we'll kind of try to address those. So I have my phone on me. It's on silent, so don't worry. You can text me, and I'll look at those, and we'll try to answer a few questions after the message today. Sound good? So it's just kind of a test run. We figure we'll do it with everybody together and see how it goes. So without further ado, I'll begin my message this morning. So when things are easy in life, right? Life itself often seems very easy. When we feel all is going well, it's hard not to see the sun shining or notice a giant rainbow that appears across the afternoon sky. Sometimes we're fortunate enough to experience this frequently in our life. Maybe we found our lucky penny that had been hiding for many years. Or we finish a school or work project and it's met with accolades and excitement from our peers. Or we have one of those days where everything just seems to be going right and falling into place. We might feel as if we're on top of the world and it would take a lot to just bring us down. We've had a great week at work. We heard some good news regarding our sister that makes us smile on the inside. And we even received a check from that class action lawsuit of 12 years ago in the mail just a few days prior. And not even overdrafted checks, a black fly in our Chardonnay, or a free ride when we've already paid could slow us down. So the issue is that things do not always go well 100% of the time in life. Ergo, we should expect that some moments we do not always see the color of the rainbows. Instead, all we see is sadness, rain, and despair. Sometimes when the going gets tough, our world gets a little rocked and disheveled. We struggle to find those rainbows or see the world as a beautiful place that it was created to be. Instead, we feel surrounded by despair, anxiety, depression, isolation, and pain. So this kind of feels like what we read from Lamentations this morning. We can hear and maybe feel the cry for help, the moans of misery and the complaints of desperation. Now, most of us have probably been there once, if not multiple times in our life. But sadly, nobody seems to be immune to some sort of suffering, and not even Jesus Christ was afforded that immunity. So as such, when tragedy or hard times or certain challenges in life strike, we might not always know where or who to turn to, right? Sure, it's easy to say, oh, I'll just turn to God. Or I will rely on my friends that I know will be there through thick and thin for me. But until we're actually in that situation, it's hard to assuredly know what we just might do. Even for well-trained first responders and military personnel, sometimes there's no amount of training that could prepare one adequately enough for any and all circumstances that may occur in life despite one's best efforts. Even this past week, there was a tragedy that struck a sweet local Oviedo family. This is a sad tale of a family of whom I've been praying for regularly this week. The father is a firefighter. I'm not quite sure what the mother does, although I know she works as well. However, they had 2 children, a 2-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son. Well, on this tragic day, all of them were at the house, and a rather large number of guests had begun showing up and coming over to have a good time with the family at their home. This group consisted of a lot of local neighbors, friends, and family acquaintances. So naturally, the parents, although I don't personally know them, were busy making their guests feel at home. We're preparing food, getting drinks, greeting others, and entertaining, and checking on the group that seemed to continue to grow by the minute at their house. Well, eventually, after not having seen their daughter for about 10 minutes or so, the mother began to worry and ask others if they had seen her recently. When nobody had, they went frantically looking for her. It was at this point that the little girl was discovered in the pool of their neighbor. So upon seeing this, her firefighter father immediately began to scream, and he tried his best to perform CPR on his lifeless 2-year-old daughter. So after hearing the screams of the father, another gentleman who happened to be in the woods was also another firefighter. They didn't know each other, but he heard the screams and he came running too. So he jumped in to fight for this little girl's life. Eventually, she was rushed to Oviedo ER, and she regained a pulse and was rushed to get airlifted to Arnold Palmer Hospital, but it was there that she was pronounced dead en route to the hospital. And now a family of 4 has to live as a family of 3. So unspeakable tragedies of this nature make it challenging for us to find hope and healing. They make it nigh impossible for us to find ways to increase our faith. We wonder how such unspeakable accidents and acts of atrocity by other people can be carried on or seemingly allowed to happen in this world. When a young daughter drowns, we ask how and why. When another senseless shooting takes place, we cry out again, and when will it stop? When we suffer our own personal loss, we ask, what have I done, or why is this happening to me? It's easy to ask these questions and wonder where God might be or where others are in times of need, or we feel a certain sense of guilt rising up inside us. Yet one thing that does us no good is to ask the what if question. Or why this? Or how come? I realize and fully understand how monumental of a task this could be. We're humans, and that's what we want to do. And for some, that will certainly be easier to follow than it will for others. And that's okay. But as a father of 3 children myself, I could not even fathom having to go through a tragedy such as that. Sure, it's easy for me to say, well, I'm a pastor. Of course I'd rely on God, and I know my faith would carry me through that difficult time. But this scenario seems extremely heavy and heartbreaking. I know I certainly would be affected, no matter how large or small one might deem my faith to be. Yet all of the curious places to find some kind of hope through tragedies like this, but there was one thing I found such kind of hope, right? There's some kind of way to find healing or a different perspective that alters the way we view the world. I happened to discover that in a little yellow fuzzy bear that wears a red t-shirt and no pants. So recently I somehow fell down the rabbit hole of famous Winnie the Pooh quotes. So a few jumped out at me, but this one in particular stood out to me. A Pooh says, "How lucky am I to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard?" Right? To me, that seems to speak to the essence of our lives. Yes, things make us sad or upset. But if we don't have the good things and the blessed things, how can we know and experience happiness with both the tragedy and the happiness that fulfills us in our lives? It's very tough to take these tragedies and despair. But in the meantime, maybe we should focus on the blessings. Appreciate the things that are hard to say goodbye to each and every day. C.H. Spurgeon, an English Baptist preacher that died in 1892, I believe said it best when he said this about pancakes. He says there are difficulties. Oh, are they back? Where'd the pancakes go? There they are. There's hardship in everything except in eating pancakes, right? And that's just the story of life. Things are going to be hard. They're going to be difficult. And it might be difficult eating pancakes if you get a 12 stack, but for the most part, eating pancakes is not too hard. But most stuff in life is hard. Inevitably, we know and can even sadly brace for the days in which tragedy will strike or enter into our lives. We might never even be fully prepared for those moments. And so in the meantime, we need to focus on the small joys in life, like eating pancakes, and being thankful for having things that are hard to say goodbye to in our life. So cherish each moment. Cherish each person. Cherish each blessing, and cherish God day in and day out. Even still, it's not always easy to be a devout follower of Jesus Christ. And sometimes we might question where God is, or why bad things happen to good people. Or we see violent act after violent act and wonder where our intervention or where our salvation might come from. And nevertheless, God calls us to remain faithful and to follow Him and devote our lives to God, no matter what circumstances we may run into in life. This means that we remain faithful and devout through the good and the bad in life. This means that we hold strong to our faith even amidst the storm and the torment of tragedy that may befall us. So as such, we need to remain focused on the blessings and the gifts that we do have in life, as opposed to what's not there, or what's been lost, or what might be missing. Perhaps this quote from Jill Duffield in the weekly Presbyterian Outlook email sums it up best. She states, "The alternative to such discipleship is stark if Lamentations is any indication of what happens when we neglect the good gifts that God gives us. Desolation, desertion, bitterness, tears. The state of our life together suffers when those of us entrusted with the good news of God fail to heed and share that with others. So despite the current climate of isolationism, we are all connected, living on one planet in the image of God. Relentless, self-serving acts ultimately destroy everyone. So followers of Jesus know the expanse of divine grace, the lengths to which God goes to reach us, and the messianic mandate to love our neighbors, all of them, all over the globe. So that's just it. In this world, we'll experience many moments of sadness, despair, and heartache. That's just part of this crazy thing we call life. There will be moments where we feel depressed, anxious, or deeply saddened. There might be moments where we struggle to say goodbye to that which we love. There will also be times where we can't wrap our minds around an event a tragedy or an action that took place in this world, we continue to maybe wonder, am I the only one? And then we are reminded that we are not. While that doesn't always fix everything, it does provide a certain avenue in which we can find hope and healing. It gives a way for our faith to increase and to grow. So furthermore, throughout all these valleys and all these downs and ups, we see that there are other things that can bring us back to the crest of the hill. But certainly friends and family are good antidotes for these symptoms. Involvement in a church can also help one get through rough patches in life. Yet what Christ reminds us in Luke is that we can do much with only a small amount of faith, even faith the size of a mustard seed. So even with that, though, it does not mean that others out there will not try to make our life more difficult or more challenging or attempt to bring us down, or that tragedy will never come our way. You know, essentially it seems that others might want us to live a life of fear. And take, for instance, terrorism. I mean, that's essentially in the name, right? People want us to live in terror, live in fear. And certain people are intent on inflicting pain and making others live in a world ripe with this sense of fear. So they go to schools or nightclubs or churches with an intent to kill and instill fear. Even a lot of the political dialogue for the past 3 decades seems to be based on fear of what will or will not happen if one does or does not do something, or if a particular bill is or is not passed. So don't get me wrong, fear can at times be healthy. It can be a good survival tool. But when we are taught and conditioned to live a life that is daily filled with fear, then we get pushed to certain detrimental limits. So small doses of fear are okay, but we shouldn't have to live our life captive to such great fear. You see, God, on the other hand, is imploring us to live a life of faith. As such, we should routinely ask, God, increase my faith. But sometimes we feel helpless and hopeless, and the only thing we can rely on is that faith. Now, will this be able to bring back the tragic loss of a 2-year-old girl? No. But it will help us find healing and hope. Will it completely nullify and get rid of all terrorist acts that are carried out in this world? Certainly not. But maybe it'll be a catalyst for change, or the strength that we need to go about our day. Our faith should give us the courage to carry on, the hope for a better tomorrow, and the assurance that God will be with us each and every day. Therefore, when we're left saddened, despondent, hopeless, or fearful or anxious, we can look to God and simply ask, God, can you increase my faith? So when we get pushed to the points of despair, we have something to hang our hat on, and at some point to begin a healing and hopeful process. Maybe a good way to view it is to recognize each and every day what blessings we have in life, and to love them, appreciate them, and cherish them every single moment that we get. So in the words of Winnie the Pooh, we can say, how lucky am I to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard. This too helps us get through those moments that are not always rosy or peachy. So instead of ruminating on the sadness, we focus on the hopefulness and the strength we can find in our faith that is provided to us by God. So just remember then, when the going gets tough, we should turn to God and say, God, increase my faith. It won't make the pain go away, but it will allow us to get going on when the going gets tough. And who knows, it might just allow us to move mountains too. Amen.